This is the last day in November in 2012, and I've been at the mall tonight. I've been at the mall for the last couple of weeks being Santa Claus, and I'll be there until Christmas Eve. Anyway, I was talking with one of the kids and one of my helpers and stuff there about that. We were talking about the drug laws, and it got me to thinking about back in the day. And then I got back here to my motel room, and I had a little something from my sister-in-law about when I met the Beatles in 1963, and so it brings me to this story. This is one of those stories where my naivete is demonstrated. I was such a moron, and I was a street urchin in San Antonio for 8 or 10 hours a day. The rest of the time I was an Army soldier at Fort Sam, Houston, Texas. And I hooked up with this nightclub owner, Publio Casillas was his name, and I really liked Publio. I still do. I never see him, but he's one of those people that has impressed me in my life. Publio, he had a band at the time called Publio and the Valiants. You can find it on YouTube. Publio and the Valiants. You pull up, there'll be a couple of his old songs that he did back then. And because I was friends with Publio, I got to meet a number of celebrity musicians back in '62 and '63. And one of them was Doug Sahm. And you can pull Doug Sahm up, S-A-H-M, Doug Sahm. And he's got some stuff there around on YouTube. Doug died a few years back, I guess 10, 15 years ago. He died. Drugs. And that's what this story is about, because we were talking about drugs, and it just reminded me of, it was, let's say, 1962, 1963, and Doug Sahm was 21 and I was 17, and he had befriended me. I liked him, he liked me, we liked each other, in a platonic sense, of course, but for some reason or other we struck it up, and I'd ride around with him. He had an old 1960 Cadillac with no muffler on it, and just old rag of a thing, and he'd a magnificent guitar player and entertainer, and he was fun, very charismatic, and I really enjoyed hanging out with him on those opportunities that I had. So one day we're outside of the place that was called the Purple Eye. It might have been the Green Onion at the time. That it changed hands a couple times, and Publio rented it from a fellow there, a nightclub sort of a guy, which is another story that was hooked to the Kennedy assassination, but we'll do that for another day. But at any rate, we were hanging around out in front of the club one day. It was in the afternoon, and just getting around the time. The club didn't open until it's around dark. I think it was 8 p.m. until 5 a.m. or something it was open. And you couldn't sell liquor or beer across the bar in Texas at that time. They had to have bottle clubs, and they sold setups. A setup ran about 50 cents at that time, and I remember the nightclub rented for $35 a night. That's what Publio paid to rent it, and he had his band there, and they played, and people would come and sit in, including Doug Sahm was one of them that would come and sit in. Real charismatic guy. And he was there one night, man. He was wired. Then this afternoon or evening, whatever it was, going in, I can't tell you for sure what time it was. But he was talking about how he'd been up all night with Ray Charles was in town, and they'd been up all night jamming, playing guitar and carrying on and stuff, and he was saying about how they had this hash, and they were doing this hash, and they were just having a wonderful time doing this hash and drinking liquor and making music, and what a great evening it had. And it was with other musicians. There was a fellow by the name of Terry Briscoe, there were these two brothers. I can't remember their names. They were studied musicians, devoid of personality, but they were. The one was a saxophone player. I forget what the other guy played. I can't think of their names right now. And Terry Briscoe and Sidney Sims, and we're all hanging around outside the club, and Doug, he's doing his act, talking about the night that before and doing all that hash and everything, and I could not get a word in edgewise, and I wanted to. I wanted to get a word in real bad, because what I wanted to say was that my mother made real good hash. I had no idea about hashish. I was so naive, and I had no idea. It's talking about sitting up doing drugs, And the hash he was talking about was not my mother's roast beef hash that we would have on Mondays, because on Sunday we'd have the pot roast and potatoes, and my mother would run it through a meat grinder and fry it up on Monday night, and we'd have hash for dinner, and I loved it. And I wanted to get that in there into the conversation. And but luckily I wasn't able to talk about that. I didn't know till years later about hash. That I realized. He used to say this thing when they go on break. He said, short pause for good cause. We'll be right back drinking mash, smoking hash, and talking trash to the wee hours of the morning. That was one of the things he would say. And I always thought he was saying, we'll be right here drinking mash, eating hash, talking trash to the wee hours of the morning. But like I say, I was naive. And the Lord has been gracious to me and has allowed me to survive over the years. But that's the story, me and Doug Sahm. He was so cool, man. I just love